I think it was somewhere around 2011, and the transport minister back then wanted a kind of a transport revolution that, okay, let's think about it in a different way. And we were going through this kind of concept, and that's where the whole MaaS got started in a bigger way. And it was actually the champion of this, and the big enabler was the Ministry of Transport and Communications in Finland. So it took them not long to understand that, hey, it's a similar evolution in the market that's happening and that was happening in the telecoms in the 90s. And they knew because they were the ones who wrote the market regulation for GSM. So they knew what needed to be done.
That was right from the middle of this week's episode, where our guest draws comparisons to the growth of mobile technology and the emerging sector in mobility as a service. It's a wonderful story, so stay tuned for the full conversation. Hello and a warm welcome to yet another episode on the Mission Shunya podcast. Hope you and your near and dear ones are doing well. First, thanks for taking time to consider this podcast out of the numerous other options that is available to you in this space. I definitely don't take the endorsement for granted. That is why I seek inputs and feedback from regular listeners on a consistent basis. missionshunya@gmail.com is the ID, so please drop a line with your feedback. Every single topic and story that we discuss on this podcast is around the theme of getting to net zero. Global decarbonization is not just about one sector or technology. We can't have only renewable energy as the main source and ignore everything else. The same is the case with transportation going all electric and so on. There are a lot of sectors that have to come together to enable this happen, and today's topic is all about one such sector, or rather a service in the sector. Very happy to have a guest who has been a pioneer of a new concept in mobility altogether. So, who is the special person and what did he come up with?
Hi, I'm Sampo Hietanen. I'm the founder and CEO of MaaS Global, also known in the world as the father of MaaS concept. MaaS means mobility as a service.
So let's begin by looking at the origins of MaaS Global. And you actually conceived this idea long before even it became prominent or even it was known in current form. So how did you come about this idea? I hear at some point that you came up with this idea during a flight. Is it true?
It actually is true. So my background is I'm a transport engineer, but probably a pretty bad one. Since from early days, I've been on all kinds of new ideas and new concept and new business areas. So I think year 99, I was making the world's first SMS based route information, traffic information systems and so on.
Nice.
But yeah, it was 2006. I was on a plane coming from London and I had to give a speech to a lot of civil engineers in Helsinki about how the disruption will look like in our beloved transport sector, the digital disruption. Let's remember 2006 and in Finland, it was all about Nokia boom. Nokia was everything and the mobile and all of that was booming like you never saw before.
True.
And everybody wanted to know what that kind of disruption, because everybody was talking then even about the digital disruptions in business X, Y, and Z. And I was on a plane and I was starting to be honest, I was a bit jealous of all my Nokia friends because they were in this sexy field of mobile telecom where everything happened. And I started thinking that, okay, what if I compared the disruption that happened in the telecom industry coming from the 80s where it wasn't really a sexy business. It was just, plugging phones to one another.
True.
And then it changed. And then started thinking that what if a similar disruption were to happen in transport? And that really hit the spot, saying that, okay, well, it is about connecting people, isn't it? But in transport, we just do it physically. It is actually the structures are quite similar as they were in the 80s in telecom, where in the 80s you had just normal phones that were in houses, and actually it was a fragmented field that was not really much of development. Normally, at least in Europe, it was local phone companies that were kind of strange things. All the investments were done on political level for the infrastructure, and so on and so on. And then all of a sudden it changed. It became international. It started to consolidate. It started to be different. But for the end user perspective, one thing changed. In 80s, nobody had their phone operator.
Correct.
Because it was the family phone in the house that was connecting things. Now, in 2006, everybody had their own personal mobile operator. And that changed quite a lot in it. And that got me thinking that, okay, hey, well, maybe there will be a similar disruption, but this one part is missing that's going to happen. That people are going to consume their transportation through an operator that just fixes them everything, all their connections. And that got me. But you can imagine next day when I was all pumped up and talking to some hundreds of civil engineers here in Helsinki, they all thought that I went cuckoo.
Correct. I mean, in 2006, I think the idea was too far ahead of its time.
Yeah.
I think it was exactly that, because the time you officially launched MaaS Global, I think it was nearly a decade later. Am I right?
Yeah, roughly about a decade later. I understood that this is a vision of the future. Before in 2006, before we could do this internet revolution in transportation, well, first of all, the internet will have to come to transport. And 2006, the connections, that's mobile internet connections, were not even close to what they were needing. Neither were the systems so that you could even put these into one subscription for a person to have all their mobility needs. So absolutely no way that this could ever happen, but it was something to work towards. Yes, it took about a decade when the world started to be technically and also, how should I put it, philosophically ready, because the difference here is that you need a lot of different bits and pieces that are never planned to fit together. Public transport, taxis, car shares, car rentals, micromobility, bikes, all of these, they were never planned to actually fit together. And they're completely different from their funding structure, their business logic, and so on. But for people, they're just means of transportation and transportation services. And it took really a long time before it was time to start going. Now you can argue, was that start of the company 2015, was it too early or not? But it started to be the time that it would be even technically doable.
That's interesting. So how were you working during that period between 2005 to 2015? Now that you had an idea, I'm sure as an entrepreneur, as someone with an idea that you believe in, it must have been really tough for you to conceive this idea for a long period. So how did you work on this idea? What were the pivoting moves that you did in this time?
Well, when you're in transport, you're kind of used to things take a bit of time. But how I did it is, of course, I ran other businesses that I did, and at the same time, kind of talk through this that, hey, but it needs an ecosystem. The tough part of this is that your product is really built on an ecosystem, and that's the tough part. So it needs a lot of discussion. It needs a lot of trust. It needs a lot of this. So I ran businesses close by in transportation, did startups, were in bigger companies, but I did probably the stupidest career move anyone can make. And all my friends kept on saying that. I was CEO of a really good startup that did usage-based insurances and telematics, and decided to jump out. That was year 2011, when the concept MaaS kind of started also picking up wind especially in Finland, where I'm from. And it was a thought that, okay, if this MaaS could really be a game changer in the whole transport industry, and I know how much it hurts our environment, kills people and so on. And if I ever will have a chance of changing the world, this could be it. But I will not be able to get this movement going if I'm running one company. So I actually jumped and went into a non-profit called ITS Finland, which promotes technology in transportation in Finland. and started running that one. And like I said, it probably was career-wise a stupid move, but it was the only way of getting this going, that you go around and you discuss with a lot of people. So in Finland, there's a really strong ecosystem and kind of this trust culture, and we were able to discuss with the authorities, with academia, and with companies quite openly that, okay, how could this really look like? And yeah, that was kind of the next step of it. And I remember giving myself that, okay, 3 years, if it doesn't start showing as a concept in Finland, if we're not able to promote this further, then I have to do something else. But well, it went better than expected.
Finland, as you say, is a market that is little different from other major markets in Europe. So how did you get started with the implementation of the project in Finland? You created the Vim app. So what were the key enablers for this to click in 2015? Of course, internet technology had penetrated and it was pretty big in 2015. So what were the other enablers?
Yeah, of course, the technology. Also, the kind of the databases, the cloud systems were an enabler that needed to be in place, because we wouldn't have these APIs, these interfaces, if those wouldn't have been developed. But that's just a part of it. The big part of this is, and I can't claim that to be it is about me. There's in Finland hundreds of people that contributed to the concept and movement.
Okay.
I think it was somewhere around 2011, and the transport minister back then wanted a kind of a transport revolution, that, okay, let's think about it in a different way. And it was in an event there where a lot of decision makers from all sectors were there, and we were going through this kind of concept, and that's where the whole MaaS got started in a bigger way. And it was actually the champion of this, and the big enabler was the Ministry of Transport and Communications in Finland. We're kind of lucky in that way that the same ministry that is taking care of the communication, so the telecom and mobile and all of this, and transport, is in the same. So it took them not long to understand that, hey, it's a similar evolution in the market that's happening and that was happening in the telecoms in the 90s. And they knew, because they were the ones who wrote the market regulation for GSM. So they knew what needed to be done. And they took strong charge in this and started also creating a completely new laws or a regulation for transportation, which kind of was the feeding ground that they took the charge in how the market vision should look like. What are the actual things? Because there's a gazillion things that need to be done before you can actually create the service. And that work was profound. It's one of those that's not so visible out there. But without that, there was no way that I could have founded this company or anything similar anywhere. But it wasn't just that. It was technology funding agency in Finland and a lot of others that just said, okay, let's try to figure this out and let's try to fix this. And by the time 2015, it started to be globally known, and people started asking, so is someone really going to do this? And actually, it was a French public transport giant, Transdev, and one of their big directors, who said that, okay, Sampo, if you're not taking this into a company, then you're all BS. So I had to do it. But actually, before that, it was a strange start for the company as well, because it was December 2014 when I was also in this nonprofit. And we said, okay, it's about time that we could actually have the world's first mobility or MaaS operator. Let's see if that's doable. I didn't know. I did not make a business plan prior to that. So I said, how about we do this in a different way? And we invited a lot of people into an auditorium and said, okay, here's the starting point. So who wants to chip in? Let's put a bit of money and jointly create a business plan for a MaaS operator. And surprisingly, 23 organizations, including Siemens, Ericsson, Uber, the taxi companies here, some others that took part. And it was really cool 6 months of creating a business plan for MaaS. And after that business plan, it was the Transdev guys who said that, no, let's stop this figuring out and put this into a company, please.
That's really fantastic. I think every business needs a move like that where you have to say like this is time for action, let's get it on the ground. You do mention about all the pieces that went into this, especially the government agencies who are putting all the pieces around transportation, getting alignment among all the public operators. So this was probably easy for you to do it in Finland because that's your home territory. But over the years, you have scaled it across many global cities. So, what are the challenges you encounter in these places? Are they so receptive that even they work with you very well, or what kind of challenges do you face there?
Well, let's start with the amazement that I have is what's been really amazing that I know when the concept MaaS was born and how it was born and what it is. Uh, Having said that, what's overwhelming is that I know that there hasn't been a secret conspiracy or anything like that or huge lobbying. It's just people getting excited about this idea all around the world. And for some reason, even taking action. So let's take Antwerp, for example. Really early, I think it was even 2016 when we just started the company. The vice mayor of Antwerp in Belgium came to our little office and said, look, I've read about this in the media. So media attention has always been extremely high, which I don't really understand why, but sometimes things happen. He came to our office, really took the trip and said, look, I want these concepts in Antwerp. I think they're one of the most congested cities in the world. They need this. What do I need to do? And I said, look, I don't know exactly, but what I know is we can come in as one of the operators if we get the APIs and contracts of public transport and taxi services, cars, and micromobility things. So if you can help us with that one, we'd be happy to do the best we can as one operator. But you're going to need more than just us. And I thought that, okay, that's about it. And in a month's time, I got an invitation to the City Hall of Antwerp, where the kind of political leadership of Antwerp were strong and saying to all of the providers in that city that, look, we want these APIs, we want these kind of services. Are you in, or how about it? They really took strong leadership in setting up the markets, not just for us. I mean, we have strong competitors in Antwerp. Like they said, it's an open field. We'll open up this market, but we will not make it just for you. We'll make it for everyone else, which is fair. And that's how it should be, because users need choices. So it's the whole story of how MaaS has been moving is just strange coincidences one after another.
It continues till date, if I'm right.
I suppose there's something in the whole concept itself, because the movement has been going so strongly from one country to another. Here I am talking to you, and from different part of the world, completely on the other side, and you know about it. So there must be something in it. So I suppose it's a strong appeal, and wherever I go, and I've given over 2,000 speeches about this, just about everywhere in the world, and I talk to normal people. And I say, wouldn't you like to have your mobility just like you have Netflix or your mobile subscription, so that you have access to everything? You don't need to think about it. And they all say, of course. I mean, that's how it always should have been. Why on earth isn't it here yet?
That's exactly what I was getting to, because I think you did mention about the delay of 10 years that it took to launch, but I think the timing was right for it to get on the global stage. That by the time you got in, as a service model kind of kicked in. So there was software as a service and everything as a service, and mobility as a service perfectly fit in there.
Yeah, I think it is. There's one thing that delays this, because first of all, the average revenue per user, let's remember, people spend roughly about 20% of household costs going to transportation. The value of this market, or the share of wallet, and this is where I like to say to all my Nokia buddies and such, that the average revenue per user is 10 times bigger than in telecom for mobility. So it's humongous field, and it's also physical. So this is where it differences from Netflix's and others, because you can have the all inclusive like with Netflix. So just use as much as you want. Now with us, the costs are real. I mean, the taxi driver really comes, and the bus has to really run. So it's not that the more the costs are are constant, and the more that uses it digitally is just it gets better. So that is a bit of a difference, and that's why it takes also a bit longer. We're now in the physical world.
It's been like 5 years plus now. When you look back at the impact that it's had, you did mention that Antwerp had congestion issues and MaaS was a key differentiator in that. So I'm sure like every city had a particular problem. In some city, probably there was no network interconnected systems. What kind of impacts would you say are like the top three impacts that MaaS has had in the last 5 6 years?
Well, as a concept for consumers, it's extremely early days. We can see some signs what it can and could be doing. We're if we compare it with cars, we're in the times before the T4 came along, so you can't really see the impacts that much yet. The impacts that we've seen, especially Helsinki, we've been longest, is that it appears it goes the right way. We just had a study of our users, and I was surprised as a transport engineer that 12% of them said that this has helped them to avoid buying a car, and another 12% said that this has helped them to get rid of their car, which is we're early stages. So I would say that this is a shockingly good news. Also, we've seen that the whole idea of multimodality seamlessly is actually correct. People use different modes like taxis and bikes to combine it with public transport, and this seems to be a trend that we can definitely start showing. Also, that it starts impacting in a smallest way to where people think that they can live. For example, that in suburbs, even if you live X kilometers away from the train station, if you have good connections with the MaaS solutions like WIM, it makes it possible to live there easily without the car ownership. So it appears that there's quite a lot of things that we can impact, but like I said, the work has just started. I mean, it's of course it's been a number of years, but we have to understand the gigantic task that we have at hand.
The task is even bigger when you look at how things are panning out, especially from the electric mobility front. Shared electric mobility is another big thing that's picking up all around the world. So, how would you put MaaS at the center of this transition towards electric mobility? I'm asking this question because MaaS now is not just in the developed world, it's also penetrating developing countries where EV penetration is not high. So, how do you think MaaS filling in that gap to kind of enable more adoption of EVs?
I think that this is kind of what we need to consider when we look at the whole mobility scene is that there are kind of three big things that happen. It's electrification, which is inevitable. It's the servitization, which is pretty much what MaaS is kind of, this is what it will look like then, how your interface as a consumer is to the EVs and such. And then it's the automation that will happen. And combining these three, I mean, what we kind of MaaS is, it's the user interface. The electrification is that this is how they will be moving without petrol, and automation will kind of change the logic of ownership completely when it is realized. So it's all these components. How I see it also is we have a chance with EVs, and what worries me is that we kind of still go with the idea that, okay, world is saved if people start buying more of the EVs. If we combine both MaaS and EVs, we can get to a world where, okay, we have availability of electric vehicles in a round of them, but people do not need to own them. And this is also how I would see that in developing countries, they can actually skip and jump ahead of developed countries. I remember a long time ago, even prior to starting this company, I had a really good discussion with someone from World Bank, and he said it really nicely over dinner that, look, he doesn't think that this will be a thing in the developed countries. This will start being big more in developing countries where they're not so keen on the asset of owning car. They can kind of skip that phase and hop on to the next one where you actually use MaaS. And this has been bugging me ever since. And I have to say, it makes all the sense in the world. The impact of this is much greater in India, in Africa, in Latin America, Southeast Asia than at the moment you can do in Europe, for example. And because it has an impact of how the cities are then built and so on and so on. So intriguing thing, and I'm expecting quite a lot of things happening, especially in India. There, I think it has a lot of ingredients to kind of be the booming nation of, let's say, the next era of mobility.
My next question was going to be around that, or the next topic was around how do you take it to the developing world. But as you rightly put it, so developing world has its own set of problems. And by enabling people to have more of shared mobility, shared electric mobility, you kind of offset a few of those challenges upfront so that you have better city planning in place. So that's really wonderful. You do mention about India, and apart from India, what are the other emerging markets that is of interest to you?
I think that the Southeast Asian market is really fast booming. They're doing quite a lot of things out there. Same applies to South America. I'm still expecting from Africa, but I think that's coming a bit later on that one. I think for any of these, it's the hard part of this is how do us transport engineer forget that we're the transport engineers, because the one thing that is often forgotten in this is what the car actually represents, and we need to fill the void of if people are not going to buy the cars, they still need dreams.
Hmm.
And the transport engineer dream is that people are like ants and they will go exactly where they should be, and they're organized in a perfect manner. But that's not how we like to do. We like our individualism. We like our freedom. We like these dreams. And it's so important that whether it's in India or Southeast Asia or any of these markets, that you actually go from the perspective of how do we fulfill the dreams of people. It has to be. It's not good enough to say that people should use this and this. They need to want to use MaaS. They need to feel that it's more. It brings them more value than owning a car. So this needs to become the new dream.
I really like the way you put it around the thinking of a transport engineer. So that clearly, again, goes back to where you all started. So it's still in your roots. That's really wonderful in way you're conceptualizing things. So how do you present the cases to cities in the developing world?
I'd say I've gone around, for example, Mexico City, did a bit of analysis there. And so is to say, okay, if you want that MaaS is an option, I think that the fair way of saying that you cannot just start banning cars. As a politician in those areas, you'd probably want to say that you do not want that the rise of cars is that many. You don't have money, you cannot build a city if that happens. So you'd want people to probably not grow the number of cars so rapidly as it appears now, but you want people to that they have more money. And it tends to be the more money they have, the more cars they buy. So what I would offer in this is, hey, why don't we see if there's an opportunity that people would like to do something else instead of those cars, without you having to actually restrict them or say that, guys, you cannot buy cars, because if you just say no to people, they're probably not going to vote you next time as a mayor. So we offer new solutions to compete against the car ownership. Now, this is, of course, appealing because at best they can control the growth of cars for at least for some parts. Now, what needs to happen if you're a mayor in India and you want this? It's actually quite simple. What you have to do is make sure that the means of transportation that you need to make a combination of MaaS from, they're available. That means that there are digital APIs. So in a way, what internet does, it makes the supply and demand visible.
Exactly.
So what you need to do is make sure that all there are beautiful services like Ola in India, for example, and many others. I know that there's quite a lot of good development in accessing buses with mobile tickets and so on. So just make sure that those interfaces are technically available so you can make an aggregated subscription out of everything that's available. So in a way, you can have a skeleton key to your city made. Then the second thing is make sure that those are available also contractually. So APIs exist for everything that's present, and also the contracts exist so that it's easy to plug into. So you can actually start making subscriptions. Then what I would always say is, please do not make it a tender, because if you monopolize the service provision, you're trying to do what maybe was tried in Soviet Union or North Korea. And you're, in a way, if you compare it with cars, you're trying to say that, well, you only get to buy this one car from me, and that's not a dream come true. So just make sure the enablers are there. There will be enough companies that pick up on this potential. So enable the market grounds so that players, MaaS Global can be one of them, but many others will definitely be there. And I think that's the right way to go about it.
I'm sure, like as you said earlier, you definitely want to see other players also be very active in the space, because the more the people, the more the services are there, the better is for the entire ecosystem. So you definitely encourage a lot more players. Sampo, on a final note, so what's next for MaaS Global and the Vim platform? So where do you see it going next? And are there any partnerships or projects that you would like to give the listeners as a preview?
Well, now getting back hopefully soon from Corona, it's time for us to get back to the plan of showing in a few other places. We have especially target markets for the next quarters is going to be, of course, continuing in Finland, but especially in Belgium, and I'm really intrigued about Switzerland, because it will be the first country where MaaS is going to be for the whole nation there. So that kind of changes the logic. So those are the key topics. And then there's one that is especially close to my heart, which is in Japan, where together with Mitsui Fudo-san, our great partner over there, we are combining your living, so your rent, together with your mobility, which is really taking this to the next level. And all the early results show that this is definitely the way forward. So you can combine your rent with different packages of mobility, and that enables you not to need a parking space, not to need these and these, but at the same time feel the comfort that you can always take any means of transportation at any given time. So the dream for us has always been that we can promise you anywhere, anytime on a whim, and with that one we're really close to it. So this Tokyo and the Japan project is really close to my heart, because it's kind of taking the whole concept to the next level.
Interesting. The Tokyo project really is kind of very interesting to me as well. Did you say rent of a physical asset, or like rent of an apartment and then the mobility?
Yeah. So on top of your rental, you can choose different mobility packages, which will give you access to cars and bikes and public transport and taxis and all of this. And it seems to be really the right solution for everyone. For the real estate developer, this can give a lot of benefits of not having to do the non-profitable parts of too many parking spaces, and probably even use that for better purposes. But at the same time, it's a really nice combination for them to be also closer to their tenants.
Well, I generally leave an action item to the listeners at the end of the episode so that they can take something that they can work on. I'm sure you left a wonderful action item for other listeners as well, where people can think of this idea as where they can combine the rent and also look at the mobility. Because in India, especially in mega cities like Bangalore, from where I come from, people actually have problem with rents, because rents are at a premium in certain locations, but they also have to travel longer distances in the traffic. So putting a price on that definitely sounds interesting.
It is. It definitely is. If I would leave your listeners with something, is also you can start by thinking about what would I have to promise for you so you would give up your own car? What would your dream package of mobility look like?
That's like a really fantastic note to leave the listeners on. So I'll definitely let you know what I hear from the audience and pass it on to you. I'm sure there'll be a lot of interesting responses on that trend. Sampo, it's been an absolute pleasure, and having followed your work in the space and getting to talk to you and hearing the story firsthand is a different experience. So thanks for taking time to share your story on the podcast.
Hey, thanks. This was great.
And with that, it's a wrap on this feature segment. Hope you like the story and the action item towards the end. I particularly like the new idea of bringing together residential rents to the mobility ecosystem and offer the whole thing as a service. So, what's your dream package of mobility that you would prefer? Let Sampo and the MaaS Global team know about it, and it could be available on the Vim platform soon. It's always a pleasure to get an expert like Sampo on the podcast. The links to connect with Sampo will be in the show notes of the podcast, so do get in touch or follow MaaS Global across the social media channels. While you are on the social media platforms, do follow Mission Shunya or spread the word in your network. It just takes 30 seconds or less, but it definitely goes a long way in spreading the message to a wider global audience. So I hope you do that, and the next time when I come back for a new episode, hopefully I'll have a few more new listeners. This is Girish Shivakumar signing off, and as always, thank you for listening.